What happens when a police officer harasses a homeless black man for being suspicious, only to be stunned into silence by the profound truth the man shares, exposed in the footage recorded on Bodycam? The night air in downtown Oakland carried a bite, the kind that crept through layers and settled in your bones. Neon signs buzzed above shuttered storefronts, and the faint hum of traffic echoed through mostly empty streets. Officer Mark Delaney adjusted his utility belt as he stepped out of the cruiser, boots crunching over a litter-strewn sidewalk. His partner, Officer Chris Ramos, followed close behind, already scanning the area. "Dispatch said he's out front by the 7-Eleven, Ramos murmured, his voice low and clipped. "Black male, mid-40s, shopping cart, possibly intoxicated." Delaney gave a small nod. "Got it." They spotted him immediately. Seated on the cold concrete just outside the pool of fluorescent light spilling from the store's entrance was a man wrapped in layers of mismatched clothing. A knit cap was pulled low over his forehead. His hands, weathered and calloused, were folded neatly over his lap. A shopping cart beside him overflowed with blankets, plastic bags, and something that looked like a broken umbrella. He wasn't panhandling. He wasn't saying a word. Delaney took the lead. "Hey, you can't be sitting here. Store's had complaints." The man didn't flinch. He looked up slowly, his gaze steady, unafraid. "I've been here all night," he said quietly. "Ain't bothering nobody." Ramos stepped closer, hand resting near his holster. "Let's see some ID." "I don't have one." Delaney sighed, irritation flickering across his face. "Of course you don't. What's your name?" "Elijah," the man replied. "That your real name?" Elijah nodded. "It's the only one I've got." Delaney exchanged a glance with Ramos. "We've had a robbery 3 blocks from here. Clerk roughed up. You fit the general description." "I've been sitting right here since sundown," Elijah said, voice calm but firm. "You can ask the clerk inside." "We'll get to that," Delaney muttered, activating his body cam with a click. The red light blinked on. Ramos did the same. The sidewalk, once still, now felt charged with something unspoken. A young woman passing by paused a few feet away, phone in hand, recording silently. Elijah noticed her but said nothing. "You got anything on you we should know about?" Delaney pressed. "Weapons? Drugs?" Elijah shook his head. "Just books. Some old paperbacks." Delaney stepped toward the cart, lifting a stained towel. Beneath it were exactly what Elijah had said, books, worn and dog-eared. Steinbeck, Baldwin, a water-damaged volume of The Souls of Black Folk. "You always carry this stuff around?" Ramos asked. "I carry what matters." His words hung in the air, simple but disarming. Delaney's jaw tightened. The protocol was clear. Check for warrants. Move him along. Make it routine. But nothing about this felt routine anymore. And the cameras were still rolling. Elijah didn't move when the questions started. He'd learned a long time ago that stillness could be a kind of armor. His hands stayed where they were, visible, relaxed, but ready. The red glow of the body cam blinked like a warning light, recording every second, every syllable. "Where are you from?" Delaney asked, his tone edged with suspicion, not curiosity. "Here," Elijah replied simply. "Here where? Oakland? This block?" Ramos pressed. "I grew up 2 streets over," Elijah said. "Haven't left much." Delaney folded his arms. "Then why are you camped out in front of someone else's store like you own it?" Elijah glanced up at the flickering light above the 7-Eleven sign. "Didn't realize resting my feet needed permission." "You've been here too long," Ramos snapped. "People feel threatened." Elijah raised an eyebrow. "By what? A man sitting on concrete with a copy of Invisible Man?" His voice wasn't confrontational, just measured. Like he'd had this conversation more times than he could count and had learned exactly how much energy it was worth. Delaney stepped in closer. Don't get smart. I'm not. I'm tired. There was a pause. Not long, just enough for the moment to tighten around them like a noose. A breeze carried the faint scent of stale beer and car exhaust. A siren wailed in the distance, moving away. You got any warrants? Ramos asked, reaching for his tablet. Don't think so, Elijah replied, but you'll check anyway. Delaney scoffed. We're just doing our jobs. Elijah looked up then, really looked. His eyes weren't angry, they were heavy, not with defiance, but with knowing, the kind that comes from years of being asked to prove you belong somewhere, anywhere. You ever wonder, Elijah said softly, why your job always seems to end up in front of someone who looks like me? Ramos blinked. What's that supposed to mean? I mean, Elijah said, voice calm. You didn't ask if I was okay. Didn't ask if I needed help. You just saw a black man on a sidewalk and made a decision. Delaney's posture shifted. You don't know what we saw. No, Elijah said, but I know what you expected. For a beat, the sidewalk held its breath. A car rolled by slowly. The woman filming from across the street kept her phone steady, expression unreadable. Inside the store, the clerk peered out but didn't intervene. Ramos tapped at the tablet. No active warrants, nothing recent. Delaney hesitated. He looked at the man in front of him, then at the blinking Bodycam light on his vest. And for a moment, just a moment, it seemed like the script they'd rehearsed 1,000 times might not hold. Delaney's voice hardened as he stepped back, folding his arms. There was a robbery tonight, he said. A liquor store on 14th and Broadway. Clerk was assaulted, cash taken. Elijah didn't react, not with surprise, not with fear. He simply blinked once, slow and deliberate. That's so? You match the description, Ramos added. Black male, mid-40s, wearing dark clothes, said he was on foot. Elijah exhaled, quiet but audible. That narrows it down, he said, a touch of dry irony in his voice. Must be 1,000 of us fit that bill between here and Lake Merritt. Delaney took a step toward the shopping cart. Mind if I take a look? I got nothing to hide, Elijah replied, gesturing subtly. Go on. He didn't flinch as Delaney began to sift through the contents, slowly, methodically, like a man trying to prove a point. A frayed sleeping bag, a cracked flashlight, 3 paperbacks with torn covers, one missing its back entirely, a folded newspaper, no weapon, no cash, just pieces of a life lived on the edge of notice. Ramos hovered nearby, watching Elijah with narrowed eyes. You've been sitting here all night? Since sunset, Elijah said, glancing at the western sky, now a navy curtain over the city. Didn't move. Clerk in the store saw me. You could ask. Delaney paused, lifting a faded copy of Native Son from the cart. He turned it over in his hand before placing it back like it was something fragile. What were you doing? He asked. Reading, Elijah said. Thinking, trying to make sense of a world that seems pretty intent on not making sense. Ramos scoffed, but it didn't hold. Not fully. There was something about Elijah's stillness that made it hard to push too far, like arguing with a man who already knew how the conversation would end. You got any idea how many times we hear that? Delaney muttered. Elijah looked up again, meeting his gaze. Yeah. And you got any idea how many times I've been told I fit the description of something I never did? No one answered. The silence that followed wasn't the kind that asked for more questions. It was the kind that exposed the absence of better ones. Across the street, the woman with the phone was still filming. A man with a backpack had stopped near her, watching. Delaney took a small step back. We're gonna talk to the clerk, he said. If your story checks out, I'll still be sitting here, Elijah said, cutting in gently. Same spot, same cart, same story. The words weren't bitter. They weren't angry, but they echoed long after they were spoken. The street, moments ago half empty, began to shift. Movement at the edges. A pair of teenagers slowed their bikes near the curb, whispering to each other. A man in a denim jacket paused mid-stride, earbuds dangling, eyes fixed on the unfolding scene. And then there was the woman with the phone, still recording, her arms steady, her silence louder than any protest. The city wasn't loud tonight, but the tension made it feel that way. Every footstep on pavement, every breath, seemed to echo. Elijah remained seated, unmoved. The soft rattle of his shopping cart in the breeze was the only sound he made. The convenience store door creaked open behind him. A young black man in a green 7-Eleven apron stepped halfway outside. His eyes darted between Elijah and the officers. He opened his mouth to speak, but then hesitated. His gaze dropped to the name tag pinned to his chest, then to the Bodycam's blinking red, then to the phone camera catching it all. He didn't say a word, just stood there half in, half out of the doorway, then slowly turned and went back inside. Delaney noticed. His shoulders tightened, jaw clenched. "We're doing our job," he said suddenly, voice sharp. The declaration wasn't for Elijah. It was for the bystanders, the recording phones, the judgment in the air. Elijah didn't move. "Funny," he murmured. "That's usually what folks say right before they go too far." Ramos shifted beside him, eyes scanning the growing cluster of onlookers. His hand edged toward his radio, like he was trying to decide whether this was escalation or just visibility. The difference, he knew, could be everything. "Nothing to see here," Delaney called out to the sidewalk, but no one moved. The teenagers stayed. The man with the earbuds crossed his arms. Another woman leaned against a light pole, arms folded, phone already live streaming. It wasn't a crowd, not really. Not yet. But it was something more than nothing. And it was watching. Elijah glanced around, taking it all in. "People remember moments like these," he said softly, not as a threat, but as a truth. They remember how power shows up and how it walks away. Ramos swallowed hard. Delaney took a step back, trying to regain control. "Sir, this is a routine stop," he said, slower now, more deliberate. "You're not under arrest, but we're investigating, and we need cooperation." "I've given you everything I've got," Elijah replied, voice steady. "The rest is yours to decide." The red light on the body cam kept blinking, a metronome to a moment that was no longer theirs alone. Elijah shifted slightly, his knees stiff from the cold sidewalk. He looked up, not at the officers anymore, but past them, as if addressing something larger than the scene around him. The crowd had grown quiet. Even the street noise seemed to fade. "When I was 9, Elijah began, voice low but clear, "I won a state essay contest, wrote about Thurgood Marshall. My mama framed the certificate and hung it above our kitchen table like it was a diploma. Said, 'One day, baby, they gonna listen to you.'" Delaney blinked. His grip loosened on the flashlight he hadn't realized he'd clenched. Elijah continued. "I used to think winning things like that meant something, that it bought me protection. Turns out all it did was make me an educated black boy with better words to explain why nobody listened." He didn't speak with anger. There was no shouting, no defiance. Just a stillness, a kind of controlled burn beneath each word, the slow unraveling of years he hadn't asked to wear on his back. "I got into Harvard," Elijah said. "Full ride, philosophy major. Spent 4 years talking about justice and ethics and what it means to be human. I quoted Kant while sleeping in shelters between semesters 'cause the dorms closed and I had nowhere else to go." Ramos looked away, suddenly fascinated by the scuffed toe of his boot. "After graduation, I came back here, thought maybe I could teach, give back. But teaching doesn't pay enough to cover rent in a city that forgets its own people. Started working nights, then my mom got sick. Cancer. I sold everything I had trying to keep her comfortable. Elijah paused. His breath formed small clouds in the night air. She died in her sleep. Peaceful, the hospice nurse said. I'd been reading to her when it happened. The fire next time, Baldwin. He looked up at the officers again, this time directly. I don't drink. I don't use. I read. I think. I try to stay out of the way. But none of that ever seems to matter when someone calls in a suspicious person, and it's me sitting on the curb. His voice didn't rise, but the silence that followed rang louder than any siren. One of the teenagers had lowered his bike, his hands resting on the handlebars like they were bracing him. The woman with the phone had tears in her eyes. Delaney's lips parted, but no words came. I'm not asking for pity, Elijah finished. Just space to exist. A little room to breathe without being seen as a problem waiting to happen. And just like that, the energy shifted. Not because the system had changed, but because the truth had found its way through the cracks. Elijah's voice carried like wind through tall grass, soft, but impossible to ignore. He didn't raise it. He didn't have to. The weight of his words did the lifting. I grew up on the south side of Atlanta, he said. 2-bedroom apartment. Me, my mama, and sometimes my uncle when he was between jobs. We didn't have much, but my mama, she believed in books. Said they'd take me places my feet couldn't. He paused, glancing up at the sky, black and cloudless. I used to sit in the public library for hours, reading anything I could touch. One day, this white librarian, Mrs. Donaldson, slipped me a worn copy of The Souls of Black Folk. She told me, you might not understand it all now, but one day you will. She was right. Delaney shifted his stance, arms crossed. Ramos stared at the cart like it might give him a way out of the moment. I applied to Harvard on a whim, didn't think I'd get in, Elijah said. But they sent a letter and a scholarship and a plane ticket, first time I'd ever flown. I stepped off that plane thinking I'd made it. Thought I'd escaped the corner stores with bulletproof glass and the sound of sirens tucked into lullabies. He looked directly at Ramos. But even at Harvard, I was still a black man in America. Still watched in bookstores. Still followed at night. Just had a backpack full of Baldwin and a student ID to soften the edges. The silence between them deepened. Only the crackling buzz of the street light remained, casting pale yellow light over Elijah's words. I majored in philosophy, he continued. Debated ethics and existence with kids who never had to worry about their lights getting cut off. I quoted Du Bois in seminars, talked about double consciousness while trying to hold my own in a world that only saw half of me. Delaney raised an eyebrow. You expect us to believe you went to Harvard? Elijah let out a breath. Not quite a laugh, more like something hollow. Does it matter if you believe it? The truth doesn't change just because it doesn't fit your picture. The Bodycam blinked steadily, recording it all. His voice, his story, the flicker of doubt in the eyes of 2 officers trained to assess threat before humanity. I fell hard after graduation, Elijah admitted, quieter now. Debt, depression. The world didn't roll out a red carpet just 'cause I had a fancy degree. And when you've got no safety net, it doesn't take much. One bad month turns into one bad year. He paused, gathering something inside himself before finishing. But I still read, still think, still remember the words that raised me. Du Bois said, either America will destroy ignorance or ignorance will destroy the United States. I'm just trying not to be another casualty of the latter. And the Bodycam kept recording. Elijah leaned back against the brick wall behind him, the cold pressing through the layers of clothing like the memories pressing through his chest. His voice had no tremble, no bitterness, just the steady cadence of someone telling a story not to be believed, but simply to be heard. I didn't fall all at once, he said. It happened in pieces, quietly, like a house settling until the beams cracked. Delaney stood stiff, jaw clenched. Ramos had gone quiet, arms loose at his sides. Neither interrupted. "My mama passed 3 winters ago," Elijah continued. "Pancreatic cancer, no insurance. I tried to get her into a trial program, but the wait lists were long, and the doctors kept saying things like quality of life. Like that's something you can calculate." He looked down at his hands, lined, dry, but steady. "I sold my laptop, then my phone, then my books. The real ones, first editions, Baldwin, Morrison. I carried those with me through every dorm and every couch I ever slept on. But they don't buy morphine, they don't pay for cremation." The street around them felt suddenly too still, too exposed. Traffic lights blinked through an empty intersection. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. "After she died, I didn't sleep right, couldn't eat, couldn't focus. Went to a clinic, finally. Doctor said it was grief and depression, gave me a prescription, said to check in 2 weeks. But I couldn't afford the refill, and I didn't have a place to put the pills anyway." Ramos looked down, shifting his weight. Delaney's eyes flicked toward the cart, as if searching for some hard evidence to anchor them back to something solid. "Next thing I knew, I was living in my car. Then the car broke down, tickets piled up, got impounded. I had a court date, but no way to get there, missed it. Warrant issued. Just like that, I wasn't a man who needed help. I was a man the system marked as trouble." Elijah looked up again, meeting their eyes without blinking. "I used to speak at conferences," he said. "Talked about restorative justice, about equity. Had people clap when I spoke. Now they cross the street when they see me." There was no rage in his voice, just the echo of someone who had once belonged to a world that moved on without him. "I'm not asking for your sympathy," he added. "I know the rules of the game. I know how invisible people become when their story doesn't fit a headline or a budget." He paused, breath forming in pale clouds beneath the streetlight. "I didn't break," he said finally. "I was broken by systems that were never built to hold me. And still, here I am, not begging, just existing." And somehow, that sounded like the most powerful thing he could have said. The silence after Elijah's last words wasn't empty. It was charged, like the air before a storm. Officer Ramos looked away first, his eyes falling to the cracked pavement beneath his boots. His jaw moved like he wanted to say something, but no words came. Instead, he stepped back half a pace, arms now hanging awkwardly at his sides. Delaney, still squared off in front of Elijah, didn't move. His mouth set into a line, fingers twitching once near the strap of his vest. He cleared his throat. "Stories like yours," he began, voice low. "They're easy to make up. Hard to prove." Elijah didn't flinch. He tilted his head slightly, studying the man in front of him, not like an adversary, but like a mirror he'd seen before. "What would I gain by lying?" Elijah asked, his voice calm but edged with something sharp. "If you've already decided who I am?" Delaney's eyes narrowed, but there was no rebuttal, because none would hold. Not against that question. Not with body cams blinking, bystanders filming, and truth settling into the air like dust refusing to be swept away. "I've been poor. I've been jobless. I've been hungry," Elijah said. "But the hardest part is knowing that people don't see me as a person, just a profile, a problem, a maybe." The woman across the street lowered her phone slightly. She didn't stop recording, but her hand trembled just enough to show she was no longer just an observer. She was changed. Delaney's mouth opened, then closed. The words that had once come so easily, the commands, the cautions, suddenly felt clumsy. He looked at Elijah the way someone might look at a puzzle missing a piece they thought didn't matter. "You can't expect us to just take your word," he finally muttered. Elijah nodded slowly, thoughtfully. "I don't, I expect you to look past the part of me that scares you and ask why it does." Ramos let out a quiet breath, not loud enough to be a sigh, but close. He stepped back again, then turned his head toward the store. "We should talk to the clerk." Delaney hesitated, then nodded, more out of obligation than conviction. As the two officers walked toward the entrance, Elijah remained on the sidewalk, unmoved. A man who had said his piece, who had made them pause, not with force, not with resistance, but with the undeniable truth of his humanity. The cracks in the armor weren't loud or dramatic. They came in glances, in silence, in the small shift between authority and doubt. And in that space, something began to change. The bell above the store door jingled as it swung open, cutting through the thick tension hanging in the air. A woman stepped out, mid-40s, olive skin, dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name tag read Maria in bold red letters. She walked past Delaney and Ramos without hesitation, her eyes fixed on Elijah like she was stepping into something she'd already decided. "I give him coffee sometimes," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Black, no sugar. That's how he likes it." Delaney turned. "Ma'am, do you know this man?" Maria folded her arms across her chest. "He's been out here since 6, sitting quiet, reading. He always sits in that same spot, just far enough not to block the door. Doesn't beg. Doesn't talk to customers unless they talk to him." "He's not loitering?" Ramos asked, a hint of uncertainty now in his voice. She gave him a look that didn't need translation. "He's not causing trouble. You want to talk about loitering? Let's talk about the guys who come in drunk, knock over shelves, or yell at my staff. This man?" She nodded toward Elijah. "He reads. That's it." Elijah gave her a small, grateful nod. Maria looked at him and smiled faintly, then turned back to the officers. "You want to accuse someone? Do it with something more than a profile and a hunch." Delaney looked like he'd swallowed something sharp. "There was a robbery nearby. He fit the description." Maria didn't blink. "So do half the men in this neighborhood. Doesn't make them criminals." The bystanders shifted, their interest reigniting. The woman with the phone raised it again. One of the teenagers leaned closer to hear. Delaney adjusted his vest, clearly trying to regain some control. "Ma'am, we're not accusing him. We're investigating." Maria raised an eyebrow. "Then maybe investigate better, because from where I'm standing all I see is a man who's tired, and 2 officers trying to turn him into something he's not." Ramos glanced toward Delaney but said nothing. Elijah remained seated, quiet, letting the moment unfold without interrupting. His eyes met Maria's. There was no rescue in her words, just recognition. The kind that said, "I see you, and that should be enough." Delaney cleared his throat. "We'll note your statement." "Good," she said, stepping back toward the door. "Make sure your camera got it, too." She turned and walked inside, the bell above the door jingling once more, this time like punctuation. The officers stood still for a moment, the momentum of the stop slipping through their fingers. And for the first time all night, it wasn't Elijah who had to explain himself. The flicker of the Bodycam footage cast a dull blue light across Sergeant Dana Ruiz's office. It was nearly midnight, and the precinct halls had fallen quiet, except for the low hum of her computer and the occasional pop of a floorboard overhead. She leaned forward, elbows on her desk, jaw tight. She watched the video all the way through. No fast-forwarding, no skipping. From the moment the cruiser pulled up to the curb to the second Elijah's voice cut through the air like a blade wrapped in velvet. At first, it was the usual. A call about a suspicious person, 2 officers responding with the kind of rehearsed authority that came from years of routine. But as the minutes passed, Dana found herself no longer watching the officers. She was listening to the man they confronted. She pressed pause and sat back, staring at the frozen frame of Elijah sitting calmly beside his cart. the red recording light casting a faint glow on his cheek. She played it again, and then a third time. By the end, she wasn't stunned by what the officers did. She'd seen far worse in her years investigating use-of-force cases. No violence, no cuffs, no physical escalation. But that wasn't the point. It was what they didn't do. They didn't listen. They didn't question their assumptions. They didn't see him. And then there were his words, clear, articulate, devastating in their truth. She'd heard hundreds of Bodycam tapes, but none like this. None that left her feeling like the real crime might be happening off camera, in the invisible architecture of the system itself. She stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the city lights blinking in the distance. Oakland had always been a city of contradictions. Wealth and poverty, tech and displacement, progress and pain. Elijah's voice was all of it, condensed into a sidewalk conversation the world wasn't supposed to hear. Dana returned to her desk, dragged the file into a shared folder, and typed a short message. Flagging this for immediate review, not a use-of-force issue, but there's something here we need to see, urgently. She sent it up the chain, to the deputy chief, the Civilian Oversight Board, and the city attorney's office. Then she sat there, hands folded, replaying one sentence in her mind like a chorus. What would I gain by lying if you've already decided who I am? It echoed in her like an indictment, not of policy, but of culture. This wasn't just a tape, it was a mirror, and the reflection was long overdue. The video hit the internet like a match to dry leaves. What began as a routine Bodycam review buried in a server folder quickly erupted across every major platform. Someone from Internal Affairs had leaked it, anonymously. The clip was under 4 minutes, edited only to remove officer names, but it didn't need polish. It needed truth. And it had that in abundance. Within hours, it had a name. The Philosopher on the Curb. By morning, it was trending in 10 cities. Cable news panels played the footage on loop, pausing to analyze Elijah's tone, dissect his Harvard references, and marvel at the eloquence of a man whose only stage had been a sidewalk. Headlines bloomed. Harvard graduate confronts system with dignity. Homeless, but not voiceless. Oakland man schools officers with philosophy and grace. The narrative spun fast, the kind that made producers salivate and viewers lean in. But beneath the sensationalism, something deeper stirred. In classrooms, teachers played Elijah's speech as a lesson in rhetoric. In barbershops and community centers, his story ignited debates about race, class, and the invisible scaffolding that kept men like him on the margins. At City Hall, phone lines lit up. Constituents demanded accountability, not because Elijah had been beaten or arrested, but because he hadn't, and still it felt like violence. The quiet kind. The kind that doesn't bruise skin but erases dignity. People weren't just outraged for Elijah. They were outraged for everyone who'd never gotten the chance to explain their story before the cuffs came out. The mayor's office released a statement. We are reviewing the incident and re-examining protocol for non-criminal encounters. It wasn't enough. Protesters gathered outside the precinct by the dozen, then the 100. Signs read, "See us." Education isn't armor. Being poor is not a crime. Elijah's name was spoken in rooms that once would have passed him without a glance. Law students quoted him in essays. Churches recited his words from the pulpit. A poet in San Francisco posted a spoken word piece titled, "What Would I Gain by Lying?" It went viral, too. Elijah, meanwhile, didn't have a phone. He didn't know he was famous. He was still sleeping beneath an overpass near the lake, still wrapping himself in donated blankets, still reading the same torn paperback copy of The Fire Next Time. But the world around him was shifting. Because somehow, one man's calm defiance had shaken loose the apathy of a city. And now people were listening, not just to Elijah, but to the silence he had broken. The council chambers smelled faintly of old carpet and coffee left too long on a burner. Rows of stiff-backed chairs faced a semicircle of polished wood and nameplates, microphones glowing red. It was the kind of room where decisions were made slowly and speeches were timed by the second. Elijah sat near the front. His coat was still worn at the cuffs, his shoes still frayed at the soles, hair unkempt, beard full. But when he rose to speak, the room leaned forward. Not out of politeness, out of necessity. His presence was undeniable. He didn't bring notes. He didn't need them. "My name is Elijah Brooks," he began. "I've lived in this city my whole life. For the last few years, I've lived on its sidewalks." The words weren't bitter. They were bare. Meant to be held, not dissected. He scanned the room, eyes steady. "I was asked to speak about homelessness, about policing, but I'm not here to check boxes on a reform agenda. I'm here because for the first time, people actually saw me." From the back of the chamber, Officers Delaney and Ramos sat in uniform, silent, unmoving. Not under review, not under fire, just present. Elijah's gaze found them. He didn't flinch, didn't look away. "You know what's harder than being homeless?" he asked the council. "Being invisible, being looked at and still not seen, being asked who you are only after a camera's rolling." A hush fell deeper over the chamber. "I'm not here to shame anyone," he said. "I'm here because I believe people can change. I've had to change. I've lost everything I thought defined me, and still I'm standing." He turned toward the crowd now, activists, city workers, students, journalists, and those like him who lived between shelters and shadows. "We don't just need housing," Elijah said. "We need dignity. We need someone to stop, listen, and believe us when we say, 'I'm not the threat you think I am.'" Then he looked once more toward the back, toward the two officers who had once seen only a suspicious figure beside a shopping cart. His eyes didn't harden. They didn't burn with resentment. They held something far harder to carry: forgiveness. It wasn't a performance, it wasn't for applause. It was the kind of forgiveness that doesn't forget, but chooses to let go anyway. The chamber stayed quiet long after he stepped away from the podium, and in that silence, something settled. Something real. Elijah didn't ask for a seat at the table. He brought his own chair, and the room made space.